And as the internet continues to buzz, the weight of Jungkook's words grows heavier with each replay. The moment wasn't scripted, wasn't polished, and wasn't buried under production gloss. It was raw, and that rawness is what makes it so unforgettable. Fans, seasoned and new, aren't just consuming another behind-the-scenes tidbit. They're experiencing the unraveling of something more human than we're used to seeing from idols who often smile through exhaustion and say, "I'm okay," even when they're not. Jungkook didn't just confess. He entrusted a piece of his emotional history to the public. There was no dramatic music, no camera cuts, just his voice, a bit hoarse, his eyes tracing the floor, as he admitted that Jin was the person who held him up when things felt like they were falling apart. And the silence that followed that confession was louder than any applause. A silence that let those words settle in every heart that was listening. It's not the kind of thing you expect to hear from someone at the top of the world. Someone who's performed in stadiums, broken records, inspired millions. But that's exactly why it resonates. Because in that moment, Jungkook wasn't BTS's youngest member or a global pop icon. He was a young man navigating immense pressure, fear, and uncertainty, like anyone else. And Jin wasn't just his bandmate. He was a source of comfort, a kind of quiet hero who never asked for recognition, yet always showed up. As fans rewind the live stream, frame by frame, lip-read the silences, and rewatch those lingering expressions, one thing becomes clear. This wasn't a slip of the tongue or a fleeting emotional outburst. This was deliberate, thoughtful, maybe even planned. Maybe Jungkook had been carrying that story for a while, unsure when to tell it, or if he even should. But something about that night, the atmosphere, the loneliness in the studio, the faint hum of the guitar, opened a door in his heart. And once opened, there was no stopping the truth from pouring out. What adds another layer of mystery is the timing. Jin has been serving his military enlistment, away from the spotlight, away from the group's public activities. Yet here was Jungkook, bringing his name into the forefront, unprompted. Was it because he missed him? Was it guilt, maybe for not saying enough when he had the chance? Or perhaps it was a form of tribute, an offering of love and thanks that he needed the world to witness. Whatever the reason, the effect was immediate. Search engines lit up. Social media timelines flooded. Editors scrambled. Headlines shouted his words like gospel. And beneath all the noise, ARMY sat quietly, absorbing what they had just heard. Not with frenzy, but with reverence. And as the days go on, the story deepens. Fans are recalling past interviews where Jungkook looked uneasy, or fan cams that captured Jin casually putting a reassuring hand on his back. Suddenly, those moments hold more meaning. They weren't just gestures. They were interventions. Tiny, silent lifelines we didn't recognize until now. Moments that Jungkook remembered clearly, even if we didn't notice them at the time. It's ironic, isn't it? That a band built on perfect synchronization, flawless choreography, and world-class production could deliver one of its most powerful performances in the quietest of ways, through a live stream, a heartfelt confession, and a name spoken with reverence. And just when you think the emotional impact has plateaued, Jungkook adds one more thing, casually but unmistakably. I hope he sees this. It's more than a statement. It's a plea, a message tossed into the digital ocean, hoping Jin, somewhere, maybe alone in his barracks or catching a rare moment of rest, sees it, hears it, feels it, because this wasn't just a thank you. It was an emotional echo of, I need you, I miss you, and most importantly, you saved me. All wrapped in one breath. What happens next? No one can predict, but the ripples are already in motion. Fan theories multiply. Articles dissect every syllable. Translation accounts work overtime to ensure every corner of the world hears what was said. And through it all, one undeniable truth lingers. This moment has shifted something, not just in how we see Jungkook, but how we understand the intricate, unspoken bonds within BTS. There's something profoundly beautiful about watching the most celebrated people in the world peel back their armor, not for drama or attention, but because the weight inside them finally became too heavy to carry alone. In that way, Jungkook's story becomes more than a headline. It becomes a mirror, For us, for anyone who's ever leaned on someone else to survive. And perhaps that's the real story here. Not just why Jungkook mentioned Jin, but what that mention reveals about the power of human connection. That beneath the lights, the awards, the hysteria, and the fame, there's still a need for someone to look you in the eye and say, "You're not alone. I'm here." That's what Jin did for Jungkook. The internet, however, doesn't sleep. As that clip of Jungkook's live stream spread like wildfire across platforms, YouTube, TikTok, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram Reels, the narrative continued to evolve, not because fans were speculating wildly, but because they were feeling something real. The raw honesty of one idol was enough to peel back the facade of stardom and remind everyone watching, even global icons are allowed to be fragile. Even they need someone to lean on. Some fans recalled older interviews from years back, moments that had passed with little attention at the time. A backstage scene in a documentary where Jin pulled Jungkook aside for a private word, a shaky voiceover from Jungkook saying, "He helped me when I didn't know what to do." Suddenly, the emotional breadcrumbs that had been scattered across time clicked into place. This wasn't an isolated confession. It was the culmination of years of silent support finally given a voice. The weight of Jungkook's words has since stretched far beyond fandom spaces. Korean media picked up the stream and dissected every sentence, every inflection. Western news outlets followed with articles like, "Jungkook opens up about the BTS member who helped him survive," or "Emotional confession. Jungkook reveals Jin's pivotal role during hard times." But none of them could fully capture what that moment felt like in real time, when his voice lowered, his eyes softened, and he asked that quiet question, "Do you know what Jin means to me?" And now, fans wonder how Jin will respond. Will there be a message? A subtle comment on Weverse, once a service allows? A lyric down the road embedded with meaning? Or will he simply watch, perhaps alone, and know that the bond he shares with Jungkook transcends public acknowledgement? Behind the scenes, the BTS members are no strangers to personal sacrifice. Over the years, each one has taken turns shouldering the group during moments of fatigue, scandal, personal loss. But rarely has the public seen such a vulnerable, direct acknowledgement of just how close one of them came to stepping away. Jungkook's choice to speak those words now, in Jin's absence, may not have been a coincidence. It may have been his way of saying, "You're still here with me, even now." What makes this moment so extraordinary is not just the confession, but its ripple effect. Suddenly, the glamour and polish of BTS fades to the background, and what remains is something far more lasting: love. Not the kind you shout at concerts, but the kind that carries you through the days when you don't know how to keep going. And for Jungkook to admit that, knowing millions were watching, took courage of a rare kind. Not just emotional vulnerability, but artistic bravery. He gave a piece of his truth away, fully aware of how it might be quoted, misinterpreted, twisted. But he did it anyway, because sometimes the only way to heal is to finally say the thing you've been carrying in silence. That silence has now turned into resonance. Fans across the world have begun writing open letters. Not just to Jungkook and Jin, but to the people in their own lives who have shown up quietly, steadily during moments of personal collapse. "You're my Jin," one tweet reads, directed at a sister. "I wouldn't still be here without you." Jungkook's words didn't just open up his world, they opened ours. And this is the kind of emotional wave that doesn't disappear overnight. It settles. It grows. It lingers. Future BTS content will be viewed through a different lens now, as fans look more closely at their interactions, their words, their pauses. Every moment will be a potential echo of this confession, because once the wall is cracked, the truth keeps flowing. IT also raises new questions. Was Jungkook the only one who struggled in silence? Has each member had a Jin at their lowest point? And if so, who held Jin when he was the one falling? The beauty of this moment is that it invites empathy, not just for Jungkook, but for every person we think has it all together. It reminds us that being strong doesn't mean never breaking. It means allowing someone else to help pick up the pieces. And now, as fans wait for a response, the silence from Jin's side is almost poetic. It reflects who he's always been in the group. Not flashy, not loud, but steady. The kind of presence that doesn't demand credit, but gives everything. The kind of person you only realize you've leaned on after the fact, like realizing the floor has been holding you up all along. Even if Jin doesn't respond publicly, he doesn't have to. Jungkook's message has already been sent. In front of millions, he said what mattered. And maybe that's enough. Maybe it was never about starting a conversation. It was about finally ending the silence. But don't be surprised if this isn't the end of the story. Because with BTS, stories don't end. They evolve. They become songs, documentaries, spoken words, and shared glances. This moment may be the seed of something bigger, something we'll look back on years from now and say, that's when everything changed. Because when Jungkook said Jin saved him, he didn't just change how we see their relationship, he redefined what it means to be a group. It's not just about performing together. It's about surviving together. And sometimes, it's about saving each other quietly, lovingly, in ways the world may never fully see. Why did Jungkook suddenly speak about Jin? Because when your world almost breaks and someone helps you hold it together, there comes a time when silence feels like betrayal. And in breaking that silence, Jungkook didn't just honor his Hyung. He reminded us all of what it means to be human, to struggle, to be saved, and to say, finally, without fear, you mattered to me. You saved me. I'm still here because of you. That is the answer. That is the story. And that, perhaps, is the most powerful performance Jungkook has ever given. And the most striking thing is this. Jungkook didn't need a stage, lights, backup dancers, or chart-topping music to deliver it. He just needed a quiet moment and a truth too important to stay buried. In that space, between his words, the trembling in his voice, the long pauses as he searched for something deeper than gratitude, he gave us something more valuable than any record or award. He gave us vulnerability, and in doing so, he unknowingly gave countless others permission to speak their own. The industry has often been a place where emotions are curated, shaped for public consumption, managed by teams and timing. But Jungkook chose to bypass all of that. He could have waited until a documentary, a scripted interview, a moment framed to make headlines. But he didn't. He chose honesty, spontaneity, a live stream, a raw night that began with music and ended with a tearful tribute to the person who may have saved his career, maybe even his life. The aftermath of that night continues to swell like an emotional tide. Fan compilations of their best moments together now play like a slow-motion love letter, Jin draping his jacket over Jungkook's shoulders during a cold shoot. Jungkook wrapping his arms around Jin in backstage chaos. Jin brushing Jungkook's hair aside with a brother's pride during a talk show. All those fragments suddenly cohere into a larger, more profound narrative. These weren't just fan service or casual affection, they were lifelines, and just like that, the bond between them has been recast. It is no longer just oldest and youngest, or Hyung and Magne. It is protector and protected, lifeline, and the one who reached out. Jungkook's emotional confession exposed a current that's been flowing beneath the surface of BTS for years. The quiet ways they hold one another up, not as performers, but as people, as brothers, as survivors of a world that often demands more than it gives. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part is knowing that Jungkook kept this close to his chest for so long. How many nights did he replay Jin's words in his mind? How many times did he think of quitting, his body still moving through rehearsals while his heart wrestled with the weight of pressure no one could see? And how often in those moments was it Jin's quiet presence, a joke, a nudge, a whispered, "You're doing okay," that anchored him? Now the world knows. Now, millions of hearts hold that story close. And in a way, it's healing something even deeper, not just the bond between two members, but the connection between artist and audience. Fans aren't just listening to lyrics anymore, they're listening between the lines of silence. They're realizing that sometimes, the most important performances happen when the music stops. This confession may spark more than tears and tweets. It may spark change. It may inspire other idols to speak more openly about their inner lives. It may encourage agencies to prioritize mental health, to give their artists not just rest but people they can trust. Because when Jungkook, golden and adored, said he almost gave up, it reminded everyone watching that no one is immune to struggle, and that no amount of fame can replace the healing power of one person truly caring. I end the days since even non-fans, casual observers, critics, people who had never listened to a BTS song, found themselves unexpectedly moved. They clicked out of curiosity, stayed for the emotion, and left with a sense of respect. Because Jungkook's story transcended genre, language, and fame. It spoke to something universal: the aching need to be seen, the terrifying feeling of being on the edge, and the immeasurable power of someone pulling you back. And yet, despite the emotional gravity of it all, there was no spectacle, no dramatic lighting, no over-the-top music score. Just a boy and his story. A screen lit with confession. A voice breaking with truth. And on the other side, a sea of people holding their breath, then holding his heart. It's possible that this will never be followed up. Jin may never respond publicly. There may be no comeback track that directly references this night. And that's okay, because the story doesn't need resolution to be meaningful. Its impact is already woven into the fabric of BTS's legacy, now forever altered by a single sentence that carried the weight of an entire chapter. I might have quit if he wasn't there. Let those words echo. Let them ripple through fan bases, through management teams, through the sterile corridors of entertainment companies. Let them be a reminder that behind every performance, every sold-out stadium, there is a human being fighting silent battles. And behind every strong idol, there may be someone just as strong, just as vital, holding them up. It's fitting in a way that it was Jin who became that person for Jungkook. Because Jin, often called the worldwide handsome, has always carried the role of emotional anchor without asking for applause. He's been the steady hand, the light-hearted brother, the voice of reason in chaos. And now, thanks to Jungkook, the world finally sees the depth of that role. Jin wasn't just comic relief or the oldest member. He was the one who saw Jungkook when no one else did. So if you're still wondering why Jungkook chose that moment, that live stream, that quiet night to speak his truth, it's because some stories can't stay inside forever. Some truths burn at the edges of silence until they force their way out, not to break something, but to heal it. Jungkook didn't speak because it was time. He spoke because it was necessary. Because the love he had carried for Jin, the gratitude, the unspoken debt, the ache of not saying it sooner, had finally reached the surface. And now that it has, the world feels just a little more real, a little more honest, and a lot more connected. Because whether you're a global pop star or someone sitting alone in the dark with your thoughts, we all need someone who shows up, who listens, who sees us, even when we try to hide. That someone for Jungkook was Jin. And now, thanks to that live stream, we all know it.